Max versus Grit, the direct combat specialist versus the indirect combat specialists. It is a grudge match that harkens back to the earliest days of Advanced Wars 1. And I actually think it is one of the most exciting matchups to play in Advanced Wars, because it's sort of like a game of cat and mouse, except that the mouse is sitting on top of rocket artillery, and occasionally the cat will have to run away. That was a very bad metaphor, but I think you guys understand what I'm saying here. When you're playing Max versus Grit, and I am playing Max today, you have to be hyper aggressive. You are really on the clock. If you do not punish the Grit player immediately, you are just gonna get blown off the map. However, I will actually say that this matchup is not easy for the Grit player either, especially not when we're playing on a map as open as this. Of course, if you're playing on a small map with lots of choke points, then nothing really prevents Grit from just setting up a wall of artillery and blasting you off the map. But on a map like this, where there are many avenues to attack, you actually have to position your artillery and rockets extremely carefully. Now, before we get into the map, I'm going to be talking a little bit about the COs and their specifics, in case you guys want to know. So I'm playing as Max right here. Despite not being the Titan that he was in Advanced Wars 1, I do think Advanced Wars 2 Max is pretty strong. He gets a 20% firepower bonus on all of his direct units, except for his infantry. However, his ranged units, aka his artillery, rockets, missiles, and battleships, gets minus 10% firepower and minus 1 range. Now, Max has a pretty strong power and superpower. His max force sets his firepower up to 40%. Now, the reason why Advanced Wars by Webs list this power as a 30% boost is because on this website, the powers actually follow the dual strike rules, meaning they get 10% extra firepower and plus 10% extra defense. And how they went about balancing this was to simply lower the firepower of every Advanced Wars 2 exclusive CO by 10%. So when Max pops his max force, he still gets the 40%, but for some reason his power is only coded to give him 30% for some reason. I don't really know why they decided to do it this way, it's just the way they decided to do things. It's very misleading, it makes you think that they've nerfed certain powers. But no, max force does give you plus 40% firepower, in addition to also giving you plus 1 movement. Max Blast sets your firepower up to plus 60% and gives you plus 2 movement. So with Max, you really want to capitalize on that massive big death push. If you can pop your Max Force or Max Blast and take out a bunch of Grit's indirects, then you're in a very good spot. However, the timing and when you decide to pop this power is everything. If you make even one small mistake and get one of your tanks trapped, it could very well be GG. So you have to play perfectly. Now Grit, he's essentially the opposite of Max. His indirects gets plus 20% firepower and plus 1 range. However, all of his direct units, not including his infantry, gets minus 20% firepower. His normal power snipe attack sets his firepower for indirects up to 50% and grants him 1 range. And Super Snipe actually works exactly the same way. It also gives 50% extra firepower, but it gives plus 2 range. So I would actually say that unless you really badly need that extra range, you're actually much better off as Grit just popping your snipe attack, because you actually get the same firepower increase from that power as you do from Super Snipe. So definitely keep that in mind if you're Grit. Don't make the mistake of popping Super Snipe just because you like seeing big range on your screen. It is actually way better to just pop his normal power over the course of a match, because you will statistically get more of them, which will result in more damage and more value over the course of a match. Now, the map that we're playing on is called Apple Pie. It is part of the official league pool, I do believe. Now, both players has access to comm towers, which are also pretty close to the center, so you have to be careful. You don't want to let your opponent snag your comm tower. Each player also has 2 bases that they start with and 1 capturable base in the center. And the second player, of course, starts with an extra infantry, as is pretty standard in maps like this. And overall, this map has a lot of forest tiles for Grit to hide his indirects in, but there's also a lot of road tiles and also relatively open terrain. So I will say that this is like a semi-good Grit map. I will also add that Grit has a slight advantage in the fact that there are no airports on this map. This means that I cannot construct black bombs, although black bombs are mostly banned in all matches I play anyway, so that doesn't really matter. However, it also means I don't have access to battlecopters. And this means that Grit does not have to worry about air units. He does not have to deploy anti-air and missiles. He can just focus on the ground combat. And I would say this definitely makes Grit a lot stronger, because battlecopters, especially max battlecopters, are fantastic at taking down Grit artillery and rockets. They got mobility, they can dart around his ground troops, they can go about mountains, and pick off his weak indirects in the back. So the fact that I do not have access to battlecopters in this match is actually a huge nerf to me. But I would say that this generally offsets the relatively open map that I'm facing Grit on. So without further ado, let us jump into the first turn. The Grit player constructs 2 infantry right off the bat. This is pretty standard. My turn rolls in and I immediately go for the base in the center. Of course, I want to capitalize on the fact that I have that early infantry, that I can get this base one turn before him. Now, of course, in the early game, there's mostly going to be infantry and capping cities, but what I always find interesting is looking at how each player decides what properties to grab. Now, I'm actually heading out into the center. I'm going to grab myself some early properties, and the reason why I'm doing this is because most Grit players do not open recons. Some Grit players do, but most Grit players don't. They don't like building recons because, of course, they get that minus 20% firepower. I do think this is a little bit of a mistake. You should definitely have some recons when playing as Grit. There are plenty of mountains in which you can place infantry on to get vision, but you do also need vision as a Grit player. And considering he's not going to be building any missiles in this match because there's no airports, he actually will either need to build recons or he'll need to be very good with his infantry positioning. So my turn rolls in, and yeah, I am just going for the properties in the center. I'm not really expecting Grit to pop out an early game recon right away, so I feel pretty confident in doing this. However, I am also going for some early properties. I do want to get a quick economy going. Reason being is I do plan to rush recons against Grits. When you're playing as Max and you're going up against Grit, you definitely want to get some early recons out, because those recons, if they can catch an artillery out of position, can be very effective. So here, I'm already building my first recon and sending it out. And I'm continuing to capture properties and building more infantry. His turn rolls in. He also goes out for the outlying properties around in his area. And he continues to build a lot of early game infantry. Still no recon out of him. Again, this is pretty predictable when it comes to Grit players. So my turn rolls in, and I'm just sending my recon forward. I don't even care if he sees it. I just want to do damage with it, pretty much. And I continue to go for many of the properties in the center. Not being super fixated on the properties close to my base right now. I just want to go ahead and grab some of those early contested properties early. And here, I open up with a second recon. Again, as a Max player, definitely spam a lot of recons versus Grit. They're going to be absolutely amazing. If you can catch a artillery, or even better, if you can catch a rocket out in the field with one of your recons, that is absolutely crazy value. You also need vision. You need to know where his indirects are. You need to scout him properly. The worst position you can be in against a Grit player is to not see anything, to be completely blind, because then he will just shoot you like a fish in a barrel. It is incredibly frustrating to go up against. So his turn rolls in, and he still hasn't built a single recon. And he continues to go for properties, and here comes the first artillery. Again, this is very classical Grit playstyle. They'll usually just pump out a bunch of artillery early on, and most Grit players will feel pretty confident just protecting their artillery with their infantry. This is another reason why recons are pretty strong as Max. You do need something that can take out infantry, and I do believe Max recons on roads can one-shot infantry, at least with a comm tower behind them. I don't remember their damage values in my head right now, but I do believe a Max recon will take out an infantry on the road with a comm tower backing it up. So if you can have one or two recons clumped together, one of them can take out the infantry on the road, the other one can take out the artillery behind. So already you got to set up for early game aggression against Grit. He also builds the second artillery. Very standard Grit right here. They will spam so many artilleries early on. So here I'm moving my recon in. He can't see it just yet. He only has 2 vision on his infantry, but all he needs to do is to just move forward. I was kind of sad I wasn't able to reach this forest tower right here. That would have been the perfect position for this recon, but at this point, I'm kind of expecting him to just go early game artillery, because this is how most Grit players tend to play. And so I'm not really worried about revealing my recon. I'm just going to do as much damage as I can with it. Interrupt some caps, you know. Basically just try to be as annoying as I possibly can be. I go for this comm tower in the center here. I want to grab this comm tower early because I want that 10% extra buff to my recon firepower. That'll set it up to 30%. That basically makes it hit as hard as a combi recon, which is very strong. And again, if you can do enough damage to Grit, you can melt through his infantry and target those squishy artillery in the back, and that is definitely what you want to do as Max. But yeah, I just continue to build up my economy here. And here I decide to build my first tank. Maybe a little bit early. Maybe I could have waited a little bit with this tank. But I figured, you know what? Maybe he'll actually build a tank of his own. Sometimes Grit players like to do that. They'll build an early game tank just to throw you off your game, to shut down your recon play. I've definitely seen it happen before. So I just want to get out a tank early to see if I can counter that play if it happens. If not, it's still a tank. It can still do a lot of damage to his infantry and artillery. So his turn rolls in, and he moves out his artillery. He sees my recon. That's fine, I kind of expected him. Here he does something very strange. He actually takes a shot at my recon with his infantry. And they actually get a pretty good luck roll too, because he deals 2 damage to it. Now, When I saw this, I remember going, okay, this is a very interesting move. So he's actually attacking my recon. It cost him 5 HP on his infantry, but he took 2 HP off my recon, which I say is a pretty, like, I think it's a pretty even trade. It's 500 essentially from both sides. But then he moves his artillery forward as well, basically reveals it to me. And I'm guessing his mindset here is that, okay, if I do a little bit of damage to the recon, it's going to take some bite out of it, so it won't do as much damage to my artillery. But still, I do think this is a pretty reckless move on his end. However, he is surrounding my recon right now, and he takes another shot at it. Now this ends up hurting him a lot more badly. It takes 6 HP of damage to his infantry, so I think I got a pretty bad luck roll on my first attack here, and I got a very good luck on my second, although he is completely exposed on the shoal here. These tiles are shoal tiles, so they have 0 defense. But still, I was very surprised to see him do this. Just basically throw away 2 infantry, and basically those infantry are useless at capping right now, to deal 3 HP of damage to our recon. It's an interesting play. I don't really know if I like it or not. I mean, yes, he has taken some bite out of my recon for sure, but he's also really hampered his own capture game in the north, because he will pretty much not get any of these properties here now. I mean, he still has a healthy infantry that can go for the comp tower, but this property and this property, he's not gonna get them at this rate. So big, he's playing very uniquely, I will grant him that. Like, this is the first time I see a player do this to me, but in the end, I don't really think it was that good. And here he builds the mech. This is pretty standard from Grit players. They tend to incorporate a lot of mechs into their unit composition, and I think this is pretty solid because, again, Grit mechs, they're not any weaker, they're 100%. So you can use Grit mechs to ward off enemy tanks and recons. They might be slow, their mobility might be poor, but getting a couple of early mechs out as Grit I think is a pretty solid choice. You can also put them in mountains as scouts. It's a lot of cool things you can do, so you definitely don't just want to build infantry and artillery. That is a very easy playstyle to counter. So my turn rolls in here, and I just remember scratching my head about those recon plays, or those infantry plays up in the north there, but I'm like, okay, well, I can always build another recon, it's fine. So I just pull it out a range of the artillery. I want to see what he's up to. The reason why I'm pulling my recon back like this in particular is because I want to see where that artillery moves. Knowledge of where Grit has his indirects is everything when you play against him in Fog of War. If you know exactly which forests he has artillery in, you can maneuver around them. However, if you do not know where his artillery are, that's very tricky. So one of the reasons why I thought this was a very bad play is not necessarily attacking my recon with his infantry. That was an interesting move, but he revealed the positioning of his artillery to me, which is very bad. I think if I played him, I would have possibly taken a more stealthy approach, maybe going south with it and try to hide it in this forest after warding away the recon. But now I have vision on it, I will be able to see if it moves south. I know there's an infantry. If it moves south, it's probably going to be here. If he moves to the left, I know it's there. If he moves back, I probably know it's there. Grit players will usually put their artillery into forest tiles. So here comes my second recon down in the south. I'm scouting his position, and I'm confidently moving forward here. I know I have to be hyper aggressive if I plan to do anything against him. If you let a Grit player set up, you're going to be in a rough position. Now, we are playing with a time limit of 25 days, which means that Grit doesn't have infinite time to set up his Wall of Doom, but still, if I let it go to day 20 without doing any real damage to him, I'm in a really bad spot. So day 7 rolls in, and he starts capturing properties, and he starts taking his comm tower. Now, I'm in a position to interrupt this if I want to, but it means my recon is going to die. So I'm gonna have to take a little bit of a difficult decision here, whether or not I want to delay his comm tower 1 turn. Now, once again, he moves his artillery up here, and I was very surprised to see him do this. Again, an artillery that is revealed to your opponent is usually a pretty weak artillery. He's trying to ward away my recon, I do get that, but I still think this was a bit of a weird play on his end. But he continues to spam infantry and continues to move towards the center of the map. He brings his mechs out, which is very good. And he starts taking the properties around his vicinity, and out comes another artillery and 2 more infantry. So again, he is going heavy on the artillery. Now, he places his artillery on this HQ right here. Once again, I think maybe this forest would have been a better spot for it overall. If I get a single infantry into these mountains, I will be able to see the artillery, and once again, this is another artillery that I've revealed. So far, this Grit player is not doing a great job hiding his artillery. He's kind of brazenly just putting them out there, hoping that they'll scare me away. But in reality, what he's doing is just revealing his hand to me, which is not a good thing. So In comes my recon, I take a shot at his infantry, capturing the city, and I see his artillery, so I'm very happy about that. I've revealed 2 artillery so far. The more artillery you can reveal, the better. I completely take out his infantry, interrupting his cap, and I move in my tank. I'm preparing to take a shot at his artillery now. Now, he has it on an HQ, which means that it has 4 defense. It's going to be a little bit hard to take down, but still, if I can get that tank in range of this HQ, I'm going to take a good, like, 5 HP off this artillery, which will drain his income in terms of repairs, and it's just going to be good for me overall. So I continue moving forward. Again, I'm like, okay, so I see that he has an artillery here, but you know what? I don't really care. So I don't really know what happened there. I think that was a bug. I'm pretty sure I moved this infantry and attacked here. I just don't think the replay caught up on it. So I think it's going to update itself when I refresh. Again, the replay is sometimes a little bit bugged. It might not show everything correctly, but it always updates itself properly at the end of the turn. So once I end my turn right here, I do believe that infantry should be dead. So here I move my recon up in this forests. I'm like, okay, if you're just going to keep edging your units forward, I'm just going to keep having this recon at the edge of your range. I want to see basically how you move your troops around. That's why I keep the recon around. The recon is not doing any damage. It's not really interrupting any caps, but it's getting me a lot of valuable info about his troop positionings. Again, if you as a max player know exactly where the enemy artillery are, then you're in a very good spot, because eventually you'll be able to maneuver around them and possibly take them out. If you don't know where they are, that really sucks. So again, I build a tank, a recon, and infantry. I'm continuing the recon pressure. I'm going to be building a lot of recons in this match because they really are the perfect grit counter. And yeah, here you can see that, okay, so I think what happened here, I might have trapped myself. Yeah, okay, so the replay didn't show this properly, but I think what happened was that I trapped myself and then I took a shot at him. But again, I don't know why the replay didn't pick this up. I hope they'll add some improvements to it soon, because it is a little bit annoying how it doesn't always catch all the movements, but luckily it does tend to update itself after each turn, so we don't get like bugged replays that are completely broken. So his turn rolls in, and he combines his infantry here, which is very interesting. I don't really know why he did this. I think it's better to have a 2 damaged infantry. Now, if you're going to combine them together, at least combine them into a healthy infantry that can capture a property in 2 turns. But combining your infantry together like this, I think you just foregoing meat shields, honestly. A 9 HP infantry is still not going to be able to capture a property in 2 turns, and it's not really going to be any better. Like, it still gets one shot by a recon. So honestly, like, I don't understand why he did this. He should have just kept them, because having many small injured infantry, you can still use those as meat shield against max. Whereas a 9 HP infantry, it's still gonna die in 1 hit. Now this time he moves his artillery, he kind of condenses his artillery together. This is kind of important to do as grit. Basically, artillery and other indirect units are much more powerful when they're together in a cluster, because it's kind of like the opposite of air units. You don't want your air units clustered together, because then it's very easy to shut them down with anti-air. But with artillery and rockets, you definitely want them covering each other. You want to position your artillery and rockets in such a way that if I want to move in a tank and take a shot at your artillery, I'll be shelled by multiple artillery in each other's vicinity. They need to cover each other, basically. So artillery definitely becomes a lot stronger when they're in pairs. If you can have like a 3rd artillery in here, and they all, especially if you can hide them all in either cities or forests, it becomes incredibly hard to break through your lines. Then your goal is to use infantry as meat shields and then have the artillery behind them, and that's kind of how you win as grit. So again, you can see he's doing that. Again, he takes a shot at my recon, and again, he did this a lot, as you can see, and I don't really know if I like this play. He's basically weakening his own infantry a lot, and in return, he's chipping my recons. Yes, he is taking some bite out of them. Yes, they are not as strong as they would be, but he's also really foregoing his own capturing when he does this. This infantry honestly should have just stayed on the city and tried its best to prevent me from taking it. And again, he did this again. He moves his infantry in here. He basically wants to see what's coming, and I get that. But by doing this move right here, he is basically just throwing away the city. He has nothing here. These are 3 completely exposed cities. They have absolutely nothing defending them. And I have infantry and recons and tanks on the way. And he's throwing away his infantry, trying to get intel here. Not a big fan of this move. He should have attacked, or he should have pulled back to the city. He needs to prevent me from taking these 3 cities from him. And at the moment, it looks like I will do that. So again, he moves in his third artillery. It's a pretty good location for it, honestly. It covers the southern tiles, so if I want to attack his artillery right here, then I will get shelled by this one, and this is a great spot for it. Honestly, it should just stay here for the rest of the match. It's covering his own HQ. It's going to be very hard for me to reach this artillery. It's in the forest, so this is just a perfect position for his artillery, really. So already you can see that he's setting up his wall, and he's making it harder and harder for me to push through it. So I have to break through it fast, or else it's going to be completely impossible for me to gain any ground here. So here comes the first rocket, pretty predictable. Now, do I think he should have built it all the way up north? I'm not a big fan of this. I think that this rocket honestly should have been built in the south. He sees that I have a lot of forces in the south here. I have a tank, I have recons, I have 3 infantry within his vision. I have 2 more recons on the way, although he doesn't see that right here. I honestly think that this rocket would have been much more useful maybe in this forest tile, because a rocket in this forest tile, let's take a look at Grit's range. So he has a total range of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So if he has a rocket right here, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now, still doesn't cover this city, but it covers both of these 2 cities and a large area here. Maybe this would have been a better position for the rocket. Alternatively, if he could have gotten the rocket on this city right here, it would have basically covered the entire center and made any attack on his HQ hopeless. Grit rockets are incredibly strong. He has a comm tower, so that's 30% extra firepower. They pretty much one-shot anything that's not in a forest or a city. I do believe they one-shot tanks. They definitely one-shot infantry. They're incredibly dangerous. So I'm not a big fan of this positioning right here. This rocket, what is it really going to do? I don't have any troops in this area, but we'll see what he ends up doing with it. And again, another artillery. I mean, this is going to be his playstyle, infantry artillery. If I am to make any critique of his play so far, I'd say he probably needs more mechs. There's a lot of mountains here. Ideally, you want mechs in these mountains. They're going to be great at warding away recons and tanks, and they also grant vision. Right now, it's going to be pretty easy for me to take down the only mech that he has here, and by doing that, I am completely blinding him, so he needs more vision, basically. So my day rolls in. I see that he's setting up his wall. I'm not deterred. I know that I'm going to find some cracks in his defenses at some point. I'm throwing away an infantry here to get a little bit of scouting info. I know that he's going to shoot my infantry down, but I can take a good chunk out of his infantry in the process. Now here, I'm actually moving on top of his HQ, and I'm taking down his infantry. I was tempted to cap here just to force his artillery to shoot on my infantry, but I decided to instead take out one of his infantry, because that's one less infantry that is going to be blocking his artillery once I do my push later. So I move my infantry into this mountain right here, I scout his artillery, and I take a shot at his infantry, and I just move in with my recon. I'm like, okay, you know, I'll take it. 4 HP off an artillery at the cost of a recon. I got more recons coming. You know what? I'm absolutely fine with this. I'm just taking a couple of early pokes at his indirect wall, making it a little bit weaker for my eventual death push later on. And here I do something I definitely shouldn't have done in hindsight. I didn't know that he had an artillery here, but I was like, okay, you know what? There's a mech here. Let's take it out. Boom. You know, and I start capping his city here. Again, he really should have focused more on the south here. He has 3 properties that are just waiting to be captured. He has absolutely nothing down there to defend them except for like a weakened infantry. So yeah, he has to be really careful here, or he'll lose all of these cities. Now I know that he moved an infantry here. I know I'm going to be able to take it out with my recon. And I start capping the city, because why not? His artillery are going to be quite busy next turn, so they won't be able to interrupt me. And I'm kind of just keeping up the pressure here. I realize that, you know, I've gained a little bit of an early advantage here, and I'm gonna press the attack as much as possible. I'm not going to let him sit back and build up that wall. I'm going to push the aggression here as much as I can. And yeah, I decide to take a shot at him even. I think I might be in range of this rocket right now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Nope, I'm actually exactly outside of it. Of course, I didn't know that there was a rocket there at this time, but of course, against Grit, you should always figure there might be a rocket involved. So I build 2 more tanks and an infantry. Again, tanks and recons and infantry are pretty much what you want against Grit. So his turn rolls in, he takes out my recon, and he starts shooting at my tank. Again, at this point, I was like, okay, that was clearly not worth it. And again, you can already see the Grit wall starting to form here. He throws away another infantry. He was very reckless with his infantry in this match, I must say. Now, there are some weird line of sight bugs here. I don't really know why. We could try restarting the turn, maybe. I think if we refresh, it's going to work, but yeah. So, and once again, he just keeps moving forward his infantry. So instead of going down there and interrupting the cap on his own property, he decides to interrupt the capture on my property for some reason, or the neutral one. I don't really know why he did that. But he's moving his artillery down here. It's very exposed down here, and it's still not covering the city. But I'm assuming he wants to put it here eventually, which would be a pretty good spot for it. However, it's very exposed right now. So here he finally builds the recon. Again, Grit players should build recons every now and then. They do need visions, although I will say that maybe a mech would have served him better in this situation, because he has a lot of mountains in this area. Once again, taking more shots at my recon with his infantry. He really loved doing that this match. I don't really know why. But yeah, he really wanted to take out that recon, and once again, he did another massive mistake, revealing his rocket to my recon. Again, I can clearly see right now that this guy's biggest problem in this match was that he revealed way too many of his indirects to me. He sees that this recon is here, just put the rocket in the forest instead. I mean, I'm not going to be able to see it moving into there because I only have vision on the edge of the forest. So yeah, definitely, he should have been way stealthier with his indirects. I've been able to spot pretty much every single one of his artillery so far. And he builds another artillery. Now look at the vision I have on the map right now. I can practically see everything, which is very nice. Now I continue to cap properties. I got a bit of an income lead over him right now. He does have a value lead though. I get myself trapped, which was a little bit annoying. But yeah, I'm just continuing to shoot down his infantry here. And every time you can take out a Grit infantry, that's pretty good. Because he would rather spend his bases building artillery rather than building infantry. So yeah, I'm just, okay, you know, if you're just going to leave your cities undefended, I'm just going to go take them. Can you truly defend all these sites at once? Again, when you're going up against a Grit player, definitely see where he focuses his attention. This Grit player is clearly focusing a lot of his attention in the center. If there are multiple points where you can attack, recognize where his wall is and simply maneuver around it. So here, he's really entrenched in the center. It's going to be hard for me to push through here. So I should just take the flanks. This northern flank right here is pretty heavily defended with this rocket, but what I should do right now is just focus all of my attention on the south, because he has so little units there, and there are 3 delicious properties that I can just take, which will give me a huge income lead in the end. So here, he interrupts my cap, which is pretty good on him. He gets himself trapped. Again, moving his infantry into the mountain to get some vision, not necessarily a bad thing. And once again, he got a really good luck roll there with his infantry, taking down my recon. Pretty good on him. But he's playing very recklessly with his infantry, and once again joining them together. Moving his rocket forward, he wants to put the rocket here. Big mistake. He sees that I have a recon here. This recon can so easily find this rocket and take it out. So he is covering it with this artillery, but still, if you let a recon shoot on your rocket, that's really bad news. So, once again, he's moving his mech into the mountains. Again, he should have had more mechs in these mountains, in my opinion. He needs more vision. He didn't really need to build this recon. A mech in the mountain would have done just the same. Here's he builds a second recon up in the north, so he clearly wants more vision, which I don't fault him for that. He is feeling pretty blind now, I think. But still, not really what you want to spend your money on as Grit. So my turn rolls in, and I don't see the rocket right now, but I know that there's something here. I saw it a couple turns back, so I know that it's in the vicinity. So I move my infantry to the mountain, I scout the rocket, and I'm like, oh really? Is he really going to just let me have this? I guess he is. Boom! And that is pretty crippling for Grit right there. That is 6 HP off a rocket. That is essentially like, what? 7,000 to 8,000 funds that I just took out of him. Even if he kills the recon, that recon has earned itself in almost twice over. So that was pretty bad on him. He should not have moved so recklessly with this rocket. Here, I was a little bit angry. I got a bad luck roll with my infantry. I thought I was going to be able to take it out. I did not. But yeah, he's playing very recklessly with his infantry, and I'm just taking every chance that I can to take them out, because I know that any infantry that I kill, he will need to rebuild. And here, this is another massive positioning mistake that I did right here. He just allows me to drive up with my... Okay, that's... Looks like I bugged the replay. Let me start over. Look at that. There we go. Now, again, I did shoot at him. It's just a replay. It's not updating. You'll see once I end the turn. I think I did like 5 HP of damage to it, so pretty good. My tanks are rolling in, and I'm just preparing the death push here. You can see how many infantry he loses here. I'm basically killing almost every single one of his infantry, and as a Grit player, you do need to keep your infantry alive. It is very important you can't just throw them away like this guy is doing. You need those things to protect your units. So yeah, I did do 5 HP of damage to this artillery. And he's getting... That's a pretty good shot that he got right here. He almost took down my tank. But he continues to attack with his infantry, being very reckless. And here comes the recon. And the rocket shoots as well. He should have probably moved it over to a city to let it be repaired. I don't usually advocate repairs, but with indirects, I do actually think you should move them back to get repaired, because a 4 HP rocket out in the open, you're just begging for it to get shot down. If you move it back to the city, it will eventually repair itself up, and it'll be in a pretty good position as well. Most of the hassle with indirects is getting them into a good position. You usually spend several turns just moving a rocket to the spot where you want it to be at. So at this point, sending this rocket over to the city to let it repair is actually a pretty solid investment, because having a rocket on the city in and of itself is really good for you. I mean, it's a valuable rocket just because it's in position. That is the difficulty with rockets. They have poor mobility and they move on tires, so it's almost impossible to get them into forests. So, and here he builds a tank, and I was very surprised to see this. I guess he really needed a response to this recon, but again, imagine if he just had some more mechs in these mountains, man. He would have had the perfect response. So instead of building these recons and those tanks, I definitely would have invested in some mechs this grid, I think. Here comes another rocket. This is probably what he should have done at the start of the match. Imagine if he already had this rocket in this forest right here. Could have just blown me away in this area. But it comes up here, maybe a little too late, but I guess better late than never. Once again, just moving his mech into the center here. This guy played so recklessly with his infantry units. He should have pulled them back. I don't know why he insisted on moving them forward into my movement. It was very, very strangely played by him. So this turn, I decide to pop my max force, and I decide that it's time to deliver a really punishing attack. And there I see his rocket. I have a 5 HP recon, but that's still a lot of damage that I did to it. It's going to get repaired up, but it's going to drain quite a bit of his income. I take down his artillery. I start capturing his city. I'm moving with my recon, and yeah, this is pretty devastating for the Grit player right here. I mean, as you can see, I'm just completely taking away his vision. I get another amazingly good engagement, and yeah, that is pretty much a game-winning push right there. As you can see, he pretty much has nothing left at this point. I have tons of tanks moving into the area, and well, he has one rocket that's injured. He has a damaged artillery, 2 artillery here, a recon. His infantry are all but gone. I mean, at this point, he does pop his super snipe, but what is it really going to do? He kills my recon, he kills my tank. I think that's pretty much everything that he does. He, instead of going for my recon, interrupts my cap. I do sort of agree with that. He also takes down one of my recons, but at this point, he just doesn't have the indirects or firepower left to do much of anything, and he doesn't have the infantry. He doesn't have the infantry in the area either to protect his indirects. It's only a matter of time before I find them, really. He does interrupt my cap up in the north here, and that was pretty well played on his end. But overall, I mean, you could take a look at our value difference. I haven't built units yet. I have a massive income lead over him. 18,000 to his 13,000. 18 units to his 15. I got way more infantry on the map. I got tanks on the way. At this point, the Grit player just doesn't have the presence on the map needed to set up a proper wall of indirects. And I'm just going to keep moving forward here. I'm applying pressure to his HQ, forcing him to spend his units attacking this infantry when they probably want to attack other things. And again, just demolishing his tank right here. I mean, I don't really agree with building a tank there again. He should have built mechs, not tanks. But it's not like I have him yet. I mean, he still has a chance to fight back. Again, I don't understand why he didn't just shoot with his rocket there first. That was kind of weird. I guess he wanted to move his rocket, which I do see. So, but he insists on moving out. He insists on setting up some more indirects, but there's not really a whole lot he can do in this situation. And again, he shoots on my infantry with his rocket. He probably should have shot on the HQ. But at the end of the day, I don't really think he can do a lot here. So my turn rolls in, I pop max force again, and I just decide to go for the monster push again. Take down his artillery. That artillery is pretty much useless right now. And I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna apply pressure to your HQ, my man. And here I was like, oh, I wish I had vision here. If I had vision, maybe this tank actually could have killed this rocket. But it's fine. I mean, you can see that he has absolutely no presence around his HQ anymore. And now I'm putting him in a pretty bad situation, because now I'm forcing him between... I'm basically making him choose between attacking my tanks, which will take out his rocket next turn, or basically protecting his HQ. He has to protect his HQ. If he doesn't protect his HQ, he will lose. And of course, he does take on my infantry, but I have many more. So, again, you can see that a Grit player is kind of tough to kill, because as long as he has indirects in woods, he will have the ability to take really good shots at you. But, you know, at this point, he probably should have just surrendered. I'm just going to blaze through the rest of the match. As you can see right here, his lines are just falling apart. Again, this Grit player, he played until, I think he played until like day 20 or something like that. He was extremely like stubborn, and I do get that. Sometimes it's fun to keep playing, but as you can see, like no matter what he does here, I'm just gonna keep pressing my momentum. He built a medium tank up in the north, which is kind of hilarious. He pops his snipe attack to try and get some more shots, but I mean, he builds 2 medium tanks actually, but at this point, what is it really going to do? Building medium tanks against Max, it's not really gonna work. I mean, he's doing a good job defending his HQ, I will give him that. But Grit medium tanks, they don't really pack a punch, not even against tanks. I mean, you can see, I can even actually attack his medium tank with my tanks and actually do pretty decently against them. That is the power of Max's firepower. But yeah, I'm just gonna speed through. I'm coming with a medium tank of my own in the south here. And you can just see that the yellow units are kind of melting away. He doesn't really have that much more in the way of indirects anymore. He's actually exclusively focusing on direct units now, which is kind of funny. I activate my 3rd max force, and at this point, I'm just surrounding his HQ. I'm even moving in a Neo tank right here, just to kind of shove it in his face. I remember building this Neo tank just to show this guy that, you know, you've lost the game. You can probably yield now, but you know, he just didn't want to yield, so I guess that means there we go, finally he yields. Took him a long time, but he yielded in the end. Honestly though, he lost this match on like day 12. A pretty fun match. I mean, it was clear this was not like a super skilled player, so I'm not gonna pretend like this guy was like a master player or something. He did a ton of mistakes. I played far from perfect too, but I think that this was still a pretty exciting match. It was a really fun match. I do think that Grit versus Max is a pretty dynamic matchup, and I do like it a lot. So yeah, let me know what you thought about this match, and let me know, who do you think has the edge, Grit or Max? And if there's any other Grit mains that wants to challenge me, I always love taking you on. Always a fun thing to do. So yeah, my name is Mangs. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.